All right. Welcome back to AR's Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I am A.R. Minabal, and today I am joined with the heavyweight champion. Coming back from his tour of Ocyin's Odyssey Part 1 and coming to you with Part 2.
Oh man,
Sam
what's up? What's
Anim
up?
Addo.
You have me way too good, man. You have me way too good. You too
uh,
good.
not enough, not
Much
enough, man.
appreciated.
All right. So tell the people where they can find you, Twitter, your Instagram. What's up?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, at s.animado. On Twitter, my handle is at animateworks. And on Facebook, I go by the same thing too, s.animado, and you can find me there too. I'm mostly doing Instagram and Twitter. Those are like the main ones.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
then on my website, you can go to www.animateworks.com, and that's where you're gonna get everything all together, kind of like the home base of like how you get the info and kind of like the updates, and kind of like spreads out into my other social media handles. So that's pretty much the gist of the way you can catch me on.
Yeah, and you gotta check out the website. It's beautifully done. We'll go into a little bit more about that later on. But what I want to get into right now is a little bit more of the techniques, kind of like what people don't talk about. A little bit more of the behind the scenes of what authors have to go through, right? So
Yeah.
a part of actually writing it down, especially for like amateurs, right? Because this is a thing that I definitely didn't think I would have to worry about when I start writing, right? The only thing you worry about is writing.
Yeah.
But then when you get all finished up and it's all said and done, you got to worry about formatting, you got to worry about covers and shit like that. So what did one thing that I realized that I loved about Ocean's Odyssey is the formatting was just beautifully well done. And not only was it legible, which is a major thing that people kind of will mess up on when they try to go for like a different format other than Times New Roman, it was perfectly legible. It didn't make the it didn't make the pages too long, too short. It was perfectly well with it, and it made it its own style. It went with the entire style of the book. It felt like I was completely in the world that you were in. It was perfectly formatted. Can you go in a little bit like of how that happened? Did you go? Was it professional? Did you do it yourself?
Yeah, I did all the editing and formatting myself. From the cover all the way down to the inside content of, like, the illustrations and the actual text itself. And yeah, so I kind of like formatted it in a way that, as a writer, you want to be able to write as you would read something.
Hmm.
So like, to me, that was like one of the biggest things, like, like, I wrote it the way I wanted to view it and see it, and that kind of like informed my decision on how I wanted to go about editing the book and everything. And so pretty much that was the main thing for me, is like, as I'm looking at it, can I, is this how I would like to read it as a reader? And as soon as I answer that question, then it's like, all right, that's exactly what I want to do. And, I keep going from there. And so that kind of like feedback of myself going back and forth from like reader to as a writer is kind of like, my response to how I want to move forward with when it comes to like editing and formatting and stuff like that. So it's kind of like how the process went through for most of the book, if not all the book.
That is phenomenal. I mean, I personally I went with a professional that
Uh-huh.
went through and like actually kind of like went and made everything look a lot better because I tried my own way and while it came out like fine when it actually through the professional it looked just phenomenally better. It was like $90 through like Fiverr, well
Uh-huh.
worth it. But
Oh yeah,
the,
definitely.
yeah, but to know that you did it yourself and well, and one, it makes it a lot more personal, right? Because you did it
Yeah.
and you can make it finely tuned to your world and it's completely your own thing. And on top of that, you made your own art. I outsourced that too. Everything, everything that you have is like uniquely within the book, and I think that's phenomenal. But what you brought up something that I really liked, and it's kind of like the whole essence of what writing is, but we go off of like what we want to see, right? Like we're writers, but we're readers at heart too. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly.
So
Yeah.
like the whole inspiration, everything that we draw from is based on like that whole like need of what we wanting to see. So that's awesome that like you're continuing that even on the little nuances. You know what I mean? That's an awesome like projection. That's definitely a trait I would like to see in almost anything. You know, that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly, and to me, like that was the most important thing to me, is like, is can I visualize this? Like, if I'm holding it in my hand, can I actually like appreciate, it as a reader? And, and like I said, like once that's established, it's a go. Because like if I'm reading somebody else's book, a lot of the times I'm like, I'm looking at it from a reader's perspective. And I find that nowadays, especially like once you start writing and stuff like that too, you not only consume the books, you also kind of like become it goes back into your feedback loop as a writer. So as you're reading, you're also taking in the information and like trying to like pick apart what it is that you're trying to take away from the information that you're taking in. So like whatever it is that you're consuming, whatever book it is that you're consuming, like I often like end up like feeling like like I'm studying the nuances of that book, like, and I'm like sort of like doing my own critiques of like what I like about it, what I didn't like about the book. And like, a lot of these things are like
Oh
inform
yeah,
my decision. And yeah, I mean, you're
I do
right
that
there,
on Netflix.
oh yeah, it's crazy, man. You
Oh
end up doing that
yeah,
with everything now,
every
and
single little thing. You know what's the
yeah,
worst part? I notice I'll do that with people talking now. Know what I mean? Like when a
yeah.
person will say something in like a way that's like vivid and like just like well written, I'll be like, yeah, that's a well written line you just said right there, and they're like, what
Right,
are
it
you talking
becomes like some
about?
kind of
Yeah.
like dialogue, like
Yeah,
you're thinking about it as like a dialogue, kind of
you're gonna
like
use
a
that?
play.
It's like, what are you
Yeah.
talking about? Use that. Well, if you're not,
Right. Hey, I'll take it. I'll take it.
uh
Uh,
no, yeah, it's funny how no, yeah, I yeah, I'm right now I was just watching a movie, and well, just not even one movie, just any movie that I'm watching, any TV
yeah.
show that I'm watching. It's just like the way they build up the plot, the character. I study every little thing about it.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, and you can't help it, right? It's like one of those things. Once it's like, you open a Pandora's box once you start writing, and once you start investing into like, creating worlds and stuff like that. It's kind of like it just kind of just happens. And whatever it is that you're consuming is just like, I gotta figure out, what I can get from this. And like, kind of like balance between like, what I like about it, what I don't like about it. This is awesome, like this is not. And it's like it's fun. It's fun to like actually like, consume stuff in that way. And not just being a consumer, but actually also being like, invested in what you're consuming, and extracting that kind of information.
Mm. So shifting gears a little bit, what is your plan for trajectory of the Ocean's Odyssey series? Is there a book two? Is there a book three? Is there a spinoff after that? How are you thinking about that?
Well, for me, when I started writing Ochin's Odyssey, the concept itself um is broad, in a sense that I went into it with a Marvel kind of like a mindset.
Mm,
Like I wanted it to be like this pool of just ideas and concepts that I can just pull out of, and it'll always stay within that pool. Like it's that the whole connected universe kind of like situation.
mm,
And so to me, like the future of Uchin's Odyssey is already like there's a lot of it that's already mapped out in my mind. Like I've seen, books and books and books of it, and beyond that, just other books that are like within that universe. They're not necessarily Ochin as a character or as a main protagonist, but other characters that will come into, this kind of like universe and kind of like populate it. So as I'm going, I'm kind of like populating this universe, and like it goes beyond book two, goes beyond book three, goes beyond book four, it goes beyond book five. And even as Ochin's Odyssey, probably I'm thinking, um, like I can't give you a definite number of how many books I think Ochin's Odyssey is going to be, but I can see it beyond five, at least five books.
Hmm. All from
Yeah,
the
I can.
point of view of Ochin, all centered around that
Yeah,
character. Okay.
yeah. For it's gonna be mainly from Ochin's point of view, but I mean, you're gonna get little tidbits of other perspectives, but it is Ochin's Odyssey at the core. Like I'm for the most part, and so beyond five books, I'm gonna figure out like where I think it's a good place to like wrap it up. And so like I don't want it to be one of those stories that just goes on forever. Like I have an ending. I know where it wants like where it needs to go and where it needs to end. So it's more so about like the middle part, like what happens there, and the kind of like stories that emerge out of that. And so I think that's the process that's probably going to take like at least like five, six, I can see seven books, in that range, in that kind of like in that in that amount. And so
I like that. That's
once
Harry
I'm done
Potter.
with it, yeah, pretty much it's a good it's a
Yeah.
good
It
medium to
goes
be
from
in, like
adolescence because the character's 18, right? So
right,
it goes
right,
from
right,
18 to, I'm assuming, however you want to space it out. But from
right,
from an
exactly.
18 to an adult, you can assume.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
not assume, but
Right. So
kind of have to.
by the time by the time it's got there, it's the progression of time as at least like played a factor into the whole Odyssey, and beyond that, once the Odyssey wraps itself up, there is an after Ochin's Odyssey that is still part of like that universe that I'm trying to like craft, but it tells its own different story, and how that story connects to Ochin and how other stories come into it. So to me, like like I said, like I've already like visualized some of these things that are going to happen beyond Ochin's Odyssey already, and what kind of like stories that I'm going to tell once this Odyssey is wrapped up. And yeah, it's exciting for me to like even think about it, and like the point where I finally get to that point, because right now it's about Ochin's Odyssey, and how I concentrate and focus on Ochin's Odyssey, because I got to build it brick by brick. So it's Ochin's Odyssey is those first kind of like foundation. He's like the foundational kind of character, like how Captain America would be to Marvel. Like
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
that foundational character, and from then on, I kind of like I'll build up from him, and like kind of like create the world out of his foundation. So that's pretty much the plan, at least long term, of what I have for Jin's Odyssey.
No, yeah, that's awesome. Because basically, I mean, what we talked about last episode that when we got together. By the way, that was episode 3. Check on that if you guys didn't. But one thing that we were talking about is that our inspiration, our motivation kind of came from the same place. That it was kind of that we just started thinking about it, and then it fruit into this entire world, into these characters, and then emotions got developed into them, and then like a story and a book, and the writing came after.
Right.
So I'm in the same space. So what happened with me is that I made allegory. So that's already written, and the one that I'm writing right now is an allegory part 2, which
Okay.
is planned out. I'm writing Eyes of Mercy, which is the point of view of two characters, two side characters, and an allegory of the end. And I don't
Okay.
think of it like a spin-off. I think of it kind of like what you were talking about with the whole Marvel thing, right?
Right.
When you're reading the story of like Captain Marvel, some random guy that he like interjects with, that he meets with, has his own. It's like his own thing, right? He has his
Right.
own. He's his own person.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But in the Captain Marvel, he's like this. He like bumps into him by mistake. Oh, look at that guy.
Like
Ha, ha, ha,
yeah.
LOL. And then like
Exactly.
yeah, and then that guy's like Black Lightning or whatever.
Right.
He ends up being like this crazy old like other person. So I love that concept, and I want to transfer that into like the literary world and like my literary world. So that's how
Right.
like decided to like divide it up. So without going into too many like spoilers of how you're doing it like on a character base, what were you thinking as far as like after Oshin? So you have the seven characters of him, right? Were you thinking of doing like a prequel, going into like the whole mirror world and all the deities themselves? Maybe like a
Um,
really highly secular thought piece that it's like revolving around the gods them like only and kind of the origin of that universe. That'd be kind of cool.
well, for me, which that I love that that concept, and I definitely have thought about prequel. Actually, I have like a short like concept of like well, not even a concept, but like an idea of how the mirror world kind of like the prequel of it before Ochin even gets to the mirror world, and like how it kind of like evolved, how it became what it is. And like I definitely like do have plans on writing a prequel to the mirror world, and I think that's probably going to be a story of its own, whether I'm going to incorporate it within the seven books or kind of like write it as its own, like kind of like standalone book, that kind of like delves into the prequel to the mirror world. I haven't actually decided totally yet, but when it comes to the actual Ochin's Odyssey and what I see beyond that, it's definitely not going to be a prequel per se. And the reason why I say that is because Ochin's Odyssey is kind of like based on the character archetype of the hero's journey,
Mm.
and his whole thing is going into this mirror world and bringing something back. And so whether he survives the mirror world and comes back to the real world or not, I'm not gonna say. But what I will say is that the hero's journey plays a very important factor of going, like I said, going into the mirror and bringing something back. And if he does bring something back, is all I would say. If he does bring something back, the story actually, I'm thinking of doing something different than what actually a lot of people do with like a connected universe and stuff like that, is especially in the literary genre, is to switch from fantasy to modern fiction and then progress into sci-fi,
Mm.
because of how the times evolve and how the mirror world and sort of like plays into the whole story. And
Hell
so
yeah.
that is the plan, is that once he actually does make it out of the mirror world, he comes back, because if he comes back to the world that he was taken out of, he comes back to the modern world, right? He comes back to the now. And so that will be kind of like a fiction, a fictionary, him kind of like dealing with the problems of now. And then as the time goes by, it becomes sci-fi naturally, because it's a projection of the future. So it goes from fantasy, which is the mirror world, because it's back, set in a time that is, before that is archaic, and then comes back to modern, which is modern fiction, and then it goes into sci-fi. So I'm going to be writing all these three genres in a sort of like a timely manner, but in a way that makes sense in how his story progresses. And all those other characters that I'm talking about in this connected universes are going to
Ooh.
play a part in how this time like kind of progresses, and their roles in this, like in this connected universes, and this time that is moving forward, and how it takes place. And so it's very exciting, as I'm even talking about it, because I've already pictured how this whole thing kind of
Yeah,
like
I'm there
comes
with you.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, yeah. Well, because I was thinking, because the thing that I think is cool, really cool about this is that, like, I almost nothing that I have plotted out is like a long 7 book trajectory over one character, right?
Right,
Iris of Mercy is 2 books, Allegory of the End is 3, Banshee is 3-parter, and a whole multiple other things that I don't even want to like drop the name of right now.
right,
They all have like about 3 parts, but the whole thing is that they're like Lego blocks, right? It's
right.
like they all like kind of like fit together. But
Yep.
I haven't thought of just a singular progression that you have here. So that thing that you're talking about of like being able to of switching into those 3 genres, not only can that be facilitated by the changing of the environment, but also by the changing of the character. You have a person that's 18,
Right.
and his skill set is that of an 18-year-old, and as he
Right.
progresses he could have a natural yearning for science and engineering, and that sci-fi element that comes about isn't just from the environment but also from him. Maybe he's able to take the lessons that he learned from the mirror world and apply it in an engineering sense and bring the and
Right.
that's crazy to me.
Yeah, because the progression of his character is going to be so drastic because his hero's journey and where he starts and where he ends up is going to be so different that it's going to evolve, along with the story. And also not just his character, but the environment and how the environment changes over the time, because we know how time kind of like changes things when it comes to like technology and stuff like that. So like that in itself, kind of like changes the story, and he has to kind of like deal with these things that are happening, to him, and to the world at large. And so that's like a lot of what happens, especially when the science fiction part kicks in, and it's things that he has to deal with, like alien invasion. Is it going to be an alien invasion story? Is it going to be a world that's like, a technocratic world? Is it going to be a world that's kind of like a dystopian? I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want to,
Yeah,
spoil
yeah.
anything right now, but that's the kind of like things that are going to happen, and he has to kind of like, deal with that kind of like world. And how does he deal with that world and with the power that he has acquired from the mirror world? How does he fit into that world? Does he become this overpowered character that's made it out of circumstances that not a lot of people have been in? Or does he kind of like just fade out in the background? Or is there more powerful things out there that kind of like come and just checks him and kind of like, and so these are the things that are going to play out as his story and his progression of like this of the times, and his character kind of like evolve, into the story itself, and the connected universe.
Man, that is wow. I really like zoned out there with you. uh Man, so I mean, like, yeah, especially when you were going into like the whole dystopian future and technocratic, I was like thinking about all the different possibilities of what that could mean. And wow.
Right, right,
Wow,
right,
wow,
right.
wow, wow, wow.
And this is also all in the context of also fitting in
Is there a
the
time
African.
slip in the world? I forgot to ask that before. Like, is there a whole thing of like 10 minutes in the mirror world equals a couple
Oh,
seconds here? Is there a oh, okay, okay.
yeah. So
Okay.
I wouldn't even get to that because that's
Okay.
because
Okay,
that's
all
gonna
right.
be a back burner of something that you will think about as you go on. Is like, is his time in the mirror world costing him time somewhere else, or is it just kind of like parallel, or is it,
Okay.
So I'm not gonna spoil that for anyone. I'm not gonna spoil that for anyone.
Well, look, the reason it got me into like so much like tangent is there's the closest thing that I have, because the whole thing
Hmm.
that is awesome about that long trajectory of a 7 books is that from a fan perspective, from a reading perspective, is that you really grow with the character. The same reason why like Harry Potter was so popular with all
Right,
these things. The same reason why serializations are so popular right now across web novels and the internet right now. That it's why it's like the medium, right?
right,
Because
exactly.
people love the idea that they're going with a thing. It's almost the same way why person that like the Kardashians are famous. It's that you're
Right,
following a
exactly.
person.
You
Every
following the
little
person. Yep.
is you're following a person, and this one it just happens to be fictional, right?
Right,
And this one
exactly.
can have magical powers and whatever the hell you want, right?
Right.
So the whole the closest thing that I have for that like type of long satisfaction is there's a character. I can't say like his connection to anybody, but there's a character named Ren that
Hmm.
he's eventually able to kind of like my universe has infinite amount of alternate realities in it, like
Okay.
alternate versions.
Yep.
It's not something that's like known to the characters, but to this character it's something that he finds out, and he's able to go in between the alternate realities to basically kind of the as a detective to kind of like piece together what happened in the previous in the events of Allegory of the End,
Okay.
because to him it's unknown.
Okay.
So he's trying to piece it together through basically alternate realities, and then is like it's sometimes that like as I'm writing allegory, it's actually a thing that I'll think of sometimes because like you're writing such a depressing scene or like like a thing that's so emotional for the characters and you're almost feeling bad because you're writing their like trauma and
Right.
then like
It is.
the only thing that will get me through it is just thinking back to the scene of like Ren in the alternate reality of like seeing the nice version,
Right.
like the happy ever after because for allegory of the end they don't get the happy ever after, right?
No,
You're the
no,
author.
no, no.
They
You're
get
the
shot.
author.
They
You
get
can
shat
craft
on. They get
it.
shat on their entire life. But then when you have Ren's character, it's like you see that nice little like fairy tale with the rainbow in the background. It's like you
Yeah.
finally get that like I was like, oh, okay, it worked out. So not in the way that we saw it, but it worked
Right.
out in another one. You know what I
Right.
mean?
And that's the plus of having an alternate universe, right? It's like being able to craft different possibilities even within the same character or within the same story, you can like switch to an alternate universe and craft a different possibility for that character and be like, this is how it could have been, and you can have all these could haves, within these alternate, parallel universe and stuff like that, which is pretty cool because it gives you a pool of like things to like be able to like draw from and be able to like
Yeah.
kind of like realize within that universe, which is pretty cool. Kind of like how Marvel and kind of like DC and them do it. Like they have like
Yeah.
they kind of like have different, they never. It's like almost
Medieval
infinite.
Batman.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They can always have this infinite pool of things to like kind of like recreate, the same kind of like person, but like or character or hero, and they kind of like do different forms of versions of them, and it kind of like works for them. Which is perfect. It's like it's great.
Yeah, like I love zoning. I just love zoning out in those like ideas of it. Like there's a character named Jin who's just like extremely passive and like is like the whole thing of allegory is that like both characters are very philosophical. One is more philosophical in the sense of like art and peace,
Hmm.
whereas like one is like his logic about philosophy is more like why we go into war, the reason why we stay in war, things like about that. And he's talking about it from the person that's sending out the troops because he's basically at the time the leader of the free world, basically.
Okay.
So he's talking from that perspective and talking about just like the nuances and the philosophy of that, whereas the other guy is more philosophical in the Socrates sense, right?
Okay. All right.
So I love zoning out in the alternate realities of like where like there's like everybody died and like Jid has like a machine gun. He's like doesn't give a fuck. He has the bandana. He's like, oh, what do you mean? That's how it is around here, son.
Like a state of perpetual war.
Yeah,
He's like caught in it. He's like, man,
yeah, the
this is
exact
life.
opposite.
This is
Yeah, I
life.
love zoning out on those little things like that because it's just so it's just so funny to me. You know what I mean? Uh, and
uh,
what's even what I like about it is something that I want to talk to you because you wrote Ochin's Odyssey and you're writing the sequels in the first person point of view, right?
oh no, no, this is I wrote it in third person. It's all third person. But then
Well,
there are segments that are in first person. Based on if he finds himself like in certain situations like dreams and stuff like that. So like there's certain things that I'll write from his perspective in first person, depending on the situation. So like I said, like if he's having a dream, the dream will be described in his first person point of view. And when he
mm,
wakes up, it goes back to third person. And the reason why I chose third person is because I can actually branch out and talk about the world and as a whole. And it's easier to kind of like disconnect from Ochin real quick and then talk about, other characters and see their perspectives. And I kind of like have my narrator's voice kind of like give it a kind of like an overlay of the world. Um, and like I mean, of course, you sacrifice a little bit to like having it so that in the first person it gets more personal, with you can get really personal with the character, and I kind of like sacrificed a little bit of that. But for this story, the mirror world is so, to me, is so important and so big, as big as Ochin's Odyssey itself, that I needed to tell it from the third person's perspective so that it can kind of like jump around and be able to like give like these short chapters where I dive into other sections of the world and then describe it, see what all these characters are doing, and then come back to Ochin and then kind of like keep going with him. Um, yeah, and so his chapters are like much longer than other chapters where I kind of like actually jump out of his story and out of his like kind of like a storyline, and it helps to be able to do that when I'm doing a third person.
Yeah, I just started experimenting with a third person.
Uh-huh.
It made me reformat the book that I'm writing right now and just rewrote it from the third person narrative, because what I started doing is and like I'm assuming like same kind of like realization you had, is that I like that I can make the narrator like witty. So the
Right.
character that I'm following is relatively dim-witted. Well, dim-witted in the sense that like he's the type of person that like he would bang his head on the door, knowing full well there's a doorknob right there, but he would just keep doing it because like, nah, this I'm gonna
Right.
do it.
I'm
I'm
going
gonna
to
do
do it
that.
because I can.
Exactly. He's just like he's dim-witted because of that sense, but it's almost like almost inspiring. Like, oh, okay, that guy's
Right.
like he's an idiot, has no thought, but like it's kind of cool, I guess.
Like a Naruto type character.
Oh, I've never seen Naruto, but I gotta get into that evidently.
Oh man, yeah. If you want inspiration for like a dim-witted but where there's a will there is a way kind of like character, Naruto is probably one of the best crafted characters, who is just like aloof, but he will keep just knocking on the door until something happens.
Yeah, that is
Kind
us.
of
He's
like
like
character.
he's not giving up, but he does
You
not
know.
matter. Yeah, and what I liked about this is that because the character was already set like that, I
Right.
was writing in a first person point of view. But then I
Okay.
realized when I went through the narrative that I can make the narrator like almost making fun of him. Like you can make the
Right.
character like the narrator almost like an
Yep.
older person that's like witty, talking about like, yeah, look at this asshole.
Right.
Like he has all the possibilities. And there's one scene that I was like writing, that he's talking about like that he's like, the whole thing I told you about, that he's like dying in the desert.
Yeah.
And he's like talking about that like he as he's crawling through the desert, like like uh instead of the one thing that he wished for and the most in the world, it wasn't water or fucking food or even like a passing hub pod to come and rescue him. It was a smoothie that he didn't get when he was with his homie yesterday, and he'd been thinking about it all since then. And then like, the narrator was talking about was like, and somehow he doesn't find it and somehow he doesn't find it ironic that his only regret about the events that led him to today, him in the desert, are about a fucking drink. That is the character. That is him.
Right, and I feel
His
like
only regret.
right. That's his only regret, and
Not,
I
oh
feel
damn, I
like
should have fucking stayed alive or fucking,
right.
not died or anything like that. So goddamn,
He's
that smoothie, man. Fucking
he's focused. He's focused. And that's all he wants. He knows what he wants, and he's everybody gonna get it. And like I feel like in third person, like it helps you be able to like either talk down on the character or talk him up.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And like you can like as a narrative voice, like it helps to be able to like to kind of like you said, like look at him as he's the idiot, or kind of like look at him as he's like, you know what, you did something good here, and you can like kind of like use that to your advantage and like prop up your characters or prop them down, kind of like situation. And it also, you can be unbiased. You can also have an unbiased perspective, and I think that's actually the most important or the most positive case to be made for third person is the unbiasedness of a narrative voice. Like you can have a way of telling the story that doesn't necessarily have a leniency towards a character. You can just tell the story as if you're the narrator, and you don't care whether it's the main protagonist or the antagonist or whichever side character. You can just tell the story, in a very, like I said, a very unbiased way, and it's okay with it because like the characters are gonna do what they're gonna do from their perspective, and that's how you're going to tell it from their side, and the antagonists are going to do what they're going to do from their perspective, and you can tell it from that side, and it doesn't really matter because you're the third, you're telling from the third person, you're the narrator. So it kind of like you can take that unbiased approach, and especially when you're crafting antagonists. And that's, to me, what was the most important, sorry, what was the most important to me was being able to tell a story from the antagonist's point of view that wasn't so much about antagonizing him, but about telling his side, and also being able to just see a day in the life of the antagonist, and like how he is going about his plans.
Hell
You know what
yeah.
I'm saying? Because a lot of the times, like, you see what the protagonist is doing in a lot of the stories, but you don't see behind the lines how the antagonist is actively,
How he feels about it.
yeah, 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 or what are his plans in regards to the character. I just don't want him to be like, the protagonist is like kind of like going about his story, and then all of a sudden the antagonist shows up like, hey, I'm here, kind of like situation. I've been plotting this whole time to trying to get you. Haha, I got you now, and you don't really know how he got there, like how what was his plans, who did he hire, who was his goons, like how did he come about to meet his goons, like how did he formulate the blueprint to get into this specific spot at this specific time. And I'm not one of those characters going to go into total detail, but I'm at least going to give you like a kind of like sort of like an update. It's kind of like of how the antagonist is, how the antagonist is progressing, and how he's doing, and how he's moving forward, just as much as the protagonist is moving forward in the story. And so the third person was important to me in that way, that it allows me to kind of like do that and kind of like shift easily between the two the two point of views, and also other characters that aren't necessarily a part of like that dichotomy of the good guy versus the bad guy necessarily. And so that was the approach, especially when it comes to like third person.
Well, as I was just thinking about that, something that I didn't ask last time, and it was a question that somebody asked me one time, and it
uh,
stumped me like a fuck. How many characters, like how many main characters would you say is in an Ochin's Odyssey? There's obviously Ochin,
yes.
and there's obviously the
um
mirror character. What else? Like, what is the total number of characters you would say interact with frequently in the book?
I would say at any given time, I try to limit the amount of characters that are, especially in
In
given
a scene.
given in a single book. I'll limit to about like um probably three or four. Yeah. So yeah. So that's about the point of views that I usually kind of like try to go for, not more, because I feel like a little bit more than that, and I'm stretching, especially if I'm writing about like 70 to 80,000 words. I feel like if that's not enough for me to stretch more than just like three or four characters. Um, and so like, yeah, I go for about like three or four, and even that, like I said, certain characters get more love than others.
Mm,
And I always make sure that I bring it back to Ochin, because at the end of the day, it's his Odyssey,
yeah.
and so he gets the chunk, like the biggest chunk of the story. And whenever I do jump around, I always make sure that it ties back to the main storyline. Like, if I'm jumping to a character, it's because that character is doing something that's going to feed in directly to the narrative of that, of the main plot. And so I make sure that I don't stray off and tell, like, just stories that are like, that might be a part of the world that I but are disconnected from what is happening. And I try to stray away from that because, like I said, like I have only 80,000 words to tell, a concise and at the same time a broad story at the same time. So I have to make sure that, everything kind of like feeds back into the main plot of the story. So if I'm going to jump to an antagonist, it's because he's doing something that is going to actively change something or is going to impact the story in a way that I need to go there and tell that specific, story in that specific chapter. And so if I'm jumping around, I always make sure that it's for a purpose that is feeding back directly into the main story, or it's going to affect the story in a major way. And if it's not Ochin, it's usually short. I try to keep the chapters short if it's not in Ochin's perspective. But for the most part, yeah, like I said, I keep it about 3 or 4 characters.
So 3 to 4 main characters, like that's the point of views you're flipping in between. What would you say is in your
Yeah.
main cast, like the people that you regularly that the main characters regularly interact with?
Um, So Ochin, of course, and then you have in this book per se, because I will say that if, for example, like if I did write, once I write the sequels, and then after that, there are going to be character changes in the perspective depending on, like I said, how the plot moves forward. So if there's a character that is new, but his trajectory affects the plot, like I'm going to feed him in there, and he might not necessarily be in the first book or in the third book. And so in this book specifically, I have Ochin, I have Eshu, which is he is the bad guy, per se, the antagonist. I won't say the bad guy, I was just say antagonist. He is the antagonist. He's like a shapeshifter god. And I have Anansi, who is kind of like the mentor character to Ochin. And I have the Ishu's kind of like minions, his henchmen, but they don't even get that much love. They get like a few chapters here and
Mm.
there. They get like 1 or 2 chapters, and like I said, that's because it feeds right back into the story. And so I would say they're kind of like main but not main characters. They kind of like just serve the story in a way that I need them to serve the story. And then I
Mm.
have a character called Rahida, and he is definitely a main character, and he is a diplomat, and he's also one of he's a bird rider. So you remember when I was telling you about the impundulu, which is like the lightning bird?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. So he's one of the lightning bird riders. And in the mirror world, they are the people who ride lightning birds are used as diplomats because they can use them to kind of like send messages back and forth very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like they ride on the fastest bird, so like they kind of like serve as diplomats. So like let's say the king or whoever is like in the ruling council will like give him a message, and it's like you got to deliver this message of importance to another nation or something like that, and you got to go. So like they kind of like take it and then they just like run with it. But they are very important because there's only 5 of them in this world, and like they're very rare. So like they're these like very important diplomats, and he's like his point of view is from that aspect of like what his character is, and he's very young too. And so it's like that he's one of the main characters in there. And so I think that's about 4 or 5. But like I said, the other the antagonist's henchmen aren't really the main character, just kind of like have chapters within the story just to move the progress forward. So
And the gods, of course.
yeah, of course the gods, but they kind of like they come in and out depending on, like I said, like depending on what book this is. And so like in this first book, the ones that you get the most time with, or the ones that you actually even get any time with, is Eshu, which is the antagonist, the shapeshifter, and then Anansi, who's the spider god. And so
Mm.
those are the ones that are in the main focus, or at the front and center in this first book. And so once the sequel comes along, you'll probably start seeing more and gods being incorporated and what their roles are gonna be within this story and how they're affecting the narrative as a whole.
Well, you know what I was just thinking that would be really cool. All right, so these lightning bird riders, they're not a new thing in the mirror world, right? They're kind of like a staple in the mirror world for like a
Oh
long time.
yeah.
So
Oh
they
yeah.
were before and after Ocean's time
Oh
frame.
yeah, yeah. Long before Chin
Yeah.
gets there, you know, or Chin
So
kind of like gets there, and the world is already
already
it's been
formed.
going on.
Already,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's been
yeah.
going on for eons.
So you know what would be really kind of like cool,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a interestingly departure,
Uh-huh.
kind of uh a story from the point of view of one of those lightning riders, but like he's bad at his job. You know what I mean? I was just thinking about this for like a character. But I just can't fit him anywhere. But like a person that's genuinely that has like a really high octane job. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
So
Like he's
and it's one of those things that like you get chosen. It's not even a thing that like you have to apply for. It's like you get chosen. Everyone's looking at him like that guy.
yeah,
That
he's
guy
the
got
dude.
chosen,
Right.
and he's there like
He's just got
he shows up like an
oh
hour and a
man.
half late, and he's like, "Dude, what do you mean you have a
Eh,
lightning bird? You have a bird as fast as lightning," and he's there like, "Dude, I mean, you know, what do you want? What do you want? What do
no,
you
yeah,
want?"
that's I feel like you always have to have like these balances within your story, right? Like these like, these comical relief characters that are just like, it helps the story move forward. Like, especially like your story can always be like, it can't take itself like too seriously all the time. Like especially like fantasy stories and stuff like that. Like characters like that need to be in, the narrative to like help lighten the mood, especially like stories that we kind of like write, and like that's like that's like I said, that's a hilarious take on
Yeah,
a character that's like you're like, man, that guy's like really important, but like, man,
horrible
what
at his
the hell is
job.
he doing?
Can't do it, dog.
Right, right. And I kind of like
Excuse me.
do a little bit of that with um the lightning bird rider, in a sense, not so much that he's like aloof or bad at his job, but he's like well, what do you might call, he's like emotionally like disconnected,
Yeah,
and like he's like a woman's man, and he like just kind of like he like plays women a lot. He's an asshole. He like just sleeps around with all these kinds of women. He doesn't care about like anything more than just him getting paid for his job, and him just like kind of like just going about living life like he's young. He got picked for this thing, like because in this story, he gets chosen, but like the ways that he gets chosen is still kind of like a little mysterious. Like nobody knows how he got chosen, but here he is, like one of the youngest people, like being chosen for this, like this prestige like job, and he's like a womanizer, and he's like kind of like just like all about the money, all about spending it, and he's just like careless, but he is good at what he does, but it balance it, like there's a counter to that, and that he's like this very like careless character, and that's just like kind of like out and about, just kind of like trying to like YOLO. He's very YOLO with the
mm,
way like he lives his life, and so like that was like kind of like the balance, and like he kind of like he is also a sort of like a comic relief because he cracks a lot of jokes. Like that's what he does. He's like one of like the what you call a class clown,
yeah.
like yeah, he's very like class clownish. He's also like sure of himself. Like I made him so like he's like quote unquote like one of like the handsome characters, but he's like careless with it. Like he just walks around like he owns everything, but he's like just so he's like one of those characters, and like and I feel like it was fun writing him because like you get to write a lot of jokes. You get to like he's very Johnny Bravo-ish, he
Yeah.
kind of like yeah. So like it's fun writing those characters. Kind of it kind of like balance out and lightens the mood of like of the story, and yeah, so yeah, definitely.
No, because I'm making all these Ochin sequels in my head. It's just like how I think of like it's just how my brain works is that I think of like a story and a storyline, and then I think of
Uh-huh.
like the anti of it. You know what I mean? It's like, oh well, what would happen if like, you know
If
what I
this,
mean?
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you think of like a really serious like I told you about that like monster alien Frankenstein thing that I made XC. It's like the picture
No.
I have on IG that it's like the alien with the gun.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, so his name like he's like a xeno dimensional entity. It's like the
Uh-huh.
full like XC.
Yeah.
So he's like I can't even say the I get he's an antagonist, but like he's purely fear based. Like he appears in a scene just appears there because
Uh-huh.
he has like a beast that like just can go in between the rift worlds, and that's kind of the first. He's like the first character to get to incept the idea that you can go in between worlds like that in Allegory of the End. But
Uh-huh.
like when they first see it, it's complete fear. You know what I mean? They're just like talking around, like, "Oh yeah, so anyway, what the fuck?" Like that. It's every single time. It's like that. It's never. It's never like. It's never calm. It's always like completely scared, and it's not only like that to like the bat to like the people that he's going against, but he's like that to the people that made him too. So the people
Oh,
that
it's like,
made him will call him and be like, "Yo, where you at?" And be
and
like,
then
"Yeah."
he's just like right behind him, just pops
They're
up.
like, "Yo, what the fuck? This shit's not working, son." And they're like, "Yo," and then all of a sudden, how it's always described that people feel like a chill up their spine. They're like, "Ooh, what the hell? Oh
Right,
my!"
like what
You know.
the
Ah! And the thing is like huge. He's like 9 foot tall, like a huge monster
right.
with like cannons on his shoulder. There's like one scene that I described that he like appears. He calls him in a like while he's on a spaceship,
Uh-huh.
thinking that he would like come later. But then he appears in the spaceship and he's like in the hallway, like fucking like like taking every little inch like a box, like.
I love that character, and I feel like there is so much you can do with him just
Yeah,
based
and
on
he's pure
that.
fear. He never
Yeah,
talks.
just from that
You
is
talk
just
to
like
him,
that's great.
you talk to him, and he just looks back at you and then just goes away. And he's like, "What
Yeah,
the
he's
fuck?
like, I got the
Did he
message.
do
I ain't
what
gonna.
I do? Is he gonna do what I want him to do? Fuck."
I don't
And
know.
then
We'll
three,
find
yeah,
out.
yeah, and then 3 chapters later, he just gets away. I was like, "Oh shit, hey, it's here. The dude's
Right,
head.
right.
Oh my god."
And he's just like just a silent killer. He's
Yeah,
just
never said
pragmatic. He's
exactly.
super pragmatic,
Never
super
says a word.
silent,
Never says a
super
word.
creepy, super like just intense, like just
Yeah,
straight intense. Just
and
yeah, that's that.
what he is that so that's what he becomes. But his origin is the short story that I sent you, The Death of Prometheus.
Yes.
That so like you see him is that he's more like his origin is a lot more like calm, a lot more like relaxed and shit. So one of the things that I'm like excited to do, like what the whole thing that I told you about, of like the disparity of like you create one thing and you just obviously want to make the opposite, is that
Mm-hmm.
in these alternate realities and opposite things, is that I want to make either a character him or some type of like a brother or some type of DNA something that it's like the dumb talkative version of him. You can't
Oh,
get
great.
this dude to shut up. You know what I mean? And the exact opposite of before is that you always know when this dude's coming. You know what I mean? He's 10 minutes away to hear him like, "Oh
And you
shit."
can like
And he's like,
you're like,
"Ah,
oh,
yeah, no, he's coming."
you're like, damn it, man, I gotta deal with this guy.
You know what I mean? Like XC is like an intense shot. Like this dude can now he can't just curve the bullet. He can literally make the bullet like bent into like he can shoot a bullet on Earth and hit
Mm-hmm.
you on like 3 galaxies that way. Like he can
Right.
make the bullet go in between the rift and appear like wherever he wants it to be. Dumb and aim and headshot in between the eyes, no matter what. Not even
It's
looking
like
at you.
he's
He's
just good
insane,
like that. He's just
insane like that. The weapon that he has and the connection that he has with it is just insane. You can't fuck with the connection. And I
I
want to make this other character the opposite of
uh-huh.
that. Like this dude can't fucking hit an
He
apple
can't hit
on a tree.
nothing.
Nothing, nothing. This dude couldn't hit water with a fucking pole. Nothing.
Right. I feel like with that you got like the perfect like you got the perfect duality kind of like like storyline where you're like soon as that one intense like the intense version of himself got created, the universe had to create another version of
Yeah, the
himself
bot.
that was,
Yeah,
yeah, it was just, and like for some reason like the existence of those two kind of like balance each other out, and like as much as this one hates this one for being alive, he can't kill him because once he kills him, he dies because it's like kind of like
Yeah.
this like, and he hates him because he's like, you're a sucky version of me. You're just like a version of me that just shouldn't exist,
And never
but
even
I have
vocalizes
to.
it. He's completely silent, never talks
Right?
over.
He's just like,
He just looks at him with hatred, like, oh, you fuck, and
right.
just
But the other
leaves.
character knows. He's like, oh man, he really hates me. Like it just
Oh man.
you see it like he's like,
He's like he's like shaking in his boots. And what I was thinking too is that like I was thinking of instead of because like he has his pet is Eclipse Darumu, this huge 9 foot fucking crazy heavyweight
oh,
champion fucking like beast. And I was thinking of for the other version of giving him like a cat version, know
I
what I mean?
can't.
Like a little baby version that goes like fucking like twirls around his legs, like goes on his shoulders sometimes.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, I was thinking of that. Because the character that goes through this those alternate realities, his name is Ren.
Hmm.
And like he's like a whole tie to the whole Pyle world that they went into in like Death of Prometheus, like that whole like rift thing.
Right.
He's that's part of his shit too. That's like
Okay.
the reason it's actually what I was like talking about, that the whole creation of like the world, that you have like XC, who's the antagonist of Allegor of the End, and he introduces you into Pyle, and then like couple books later you get into Pyle is the main setting of the
Right.
book
Right.
after, which is why I wanted to talk about the whole sequels with Ochyin with you, because you said prequel is a maybe, like you weren't thinking about it, but perhaps, right? So as for sequels, were you thinking of something along the lines of like what we were just talking about now, like a son of Ochin, or maybe like maybe you find out that there's like another mirror world, or maybe like or
N-
Ochin has a family, right? So he has like, as he's going on in the mirror, there's like a real life going on. Does he have like a brother and sister?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. He has family
Boom.
beyond the
That
mirror,
that
and
that's a fucking that's a side story right there.
right, right,
A
and
sequel, I mean.
that's kind of like what he's trying to get back to, right? Because like the Ocean's Odyssey is kind of like him have being pulled out of his reality and being flung into another one, and so while he's there, he's this life is still going on, like that life that he left behind is still going on, and he's trying to get back to it, and so like there is that's its own, like you said, like that's its own story, and but for me, like the sequels are going to focus on what happens once he returns
Mm.
from the mirror, what it went was once he returns from his hero's journey, and the things that he brings back with him, the power, the knowledge, all of that stuff that he brings back with him, what happens? Does he come back and his family is still alive? Is this is all this stuff, all these questions that are up in the air, about what happens after Ochin's Odyssey and stuff like that. And so to me, like what is the world going to be like, and like I said, like is time, would time have gone, like has would 1 year elapse, or would it be 20 years elapsed gone while he was gone? Would it be 100 years elapsed while he was gone? And so like it's one of those things where it's going to be like, I'm going to make sure that once he returns, there is going to be something that he's going to return to, that is not going to be how he thought it was going to be, and what he's always worked his way to try to come back to. And so like that is going to be in itself the sequel. And also what I'm going to be doing too, and like I said, like when it comes to the connected universes, while Ochin, when I'm done with Ochin's Odyssey, I'm not necessarily going to continue, like pick up right where I left off with Ochin's Odyssey. I'm going to go into these characters that are a part
Mm.
of this connected universe and their hero's journey. Kind of like it's gonna be like Ochin's Odyssey. Let's say, for example, Ochin's Odyssey is Captain America. I'm gonna go into the Iron Man version of that story, and I'm going to go into the Hulk version of that story. And there's going to be these characters that are going to be doing things, but it's all in that same timeline, and it's all going to feed back into the main storyline, so that once I come back to Ochin's Odyssey, then it like picks back up, and then there is already these things that are like converging, and this adventure sort of like situation where there's going to be the Thanos that kind of like brings them all together back together, the inciting incident that's gonna like kind of like pull them back in into like the story again, and how they come back together, and if they do come back together, and all that stuff. And so that's more along the lines of what's going to happen once Ochin's Odyssey is wrapped up, and what's going to happen with his story afterwards, and other stories consequent.
I fucking love that. So after so the all right, so we're at book 7 of Ochin's
Hmm.
Odyssey. We
Yeah.
just turned to like chap to page like 280, right?
Hmm.
So on that page, on like the last like couple of pages, it's not like the fucking fairy tale that he comes back and like it's the end of the
No.
book is the end of the Odyssey. It's
Yes.
not that is man, that's cool. I fuck with that a lot.
Yeah. It ends
Because
the Odyssey, and you
I was
found
thinking that it was the end of his story. Not I love man.
no,
It's what we talked
no.
about.
This is
It's what we talked about before with like perfect names. That is a perfect name. It really is Ochin's Odyssey to the extent 7 books,
yep.
just his Odyssey, not his life, not a
No, not
thing,
his
just
life.
a slice. Literally, like, you got like a
Yep.
big old fucking slice of
Oh
pie.
yeah, it's like it's like pretty much like just telling you the grind. This is literally the 7 books is his grind.
Mm.
Like it's his Odysseus, like him on that journey trying to get back home, and all the ish that happens to him, and what these powers that be are trying to like either helping him out or trying to stop him from getting to what he wants to get back to. And so like that is what the Odyssey is about. And in a sense, like once that is over, then it's not just a closure, but it's opens up a
Yeah,
whole
rips
new,
open.
like
Yeah,
a whole new cycle. Or yeah, it rips up because he's like I said, like his hero's journey is him going in there and then bringing something back with him, and what he brings back with him is what's very important, and how he comes back, and who he transforms into. And that in itself is a focus in the sequels to come, like after the Odyssey, and how it transforms the world, because it's going to impact the certain things that happen afterwards, and and stuff like that. And so like that's just to me, the Odyssey is just the beginning per se of the story at large, and the concept of this universe at large.
fuck, that's
And so
awesome.
it's sort of like you can say Ochin's Odyssey is the inciting incident, of everything that comes afterwards, you know.
That's all because for me, allegory is like that, but allegory is 2 quick books. Even the third book of Allegory of the End is more of like it's kind of what you're talking about. So allegory of the end is the incited incident, and then book
Right.
3 would just kind of be kind of like, oh, and by the way, this is what happens to specifically the characters in it. But allegory is
Right.
just the inciting thing. But that's done in 2 books. You're doing it in set. I
Right.
mean, that's fucking insane.
Yeah.
Talk about world building. But so like, and you know what, what's crazy too is that you can go Rick Riordan with it, right? So you did African based culture. This one, imagine going into like another culture, right? Imagine going into what's a culture that isn't really going into another one that isn't really fucked with that hard in
um
Amazonian basin or fucking
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Like once Ochin comes back into the world, like, and once I start telling stories from like other characters and stuff like that, there are going to be nuggets from like, different parts of the world that are going to be like, like told from a very, very like, unique and different perspective that you don't actually like, like you said, get to see,
or like
get it
every
told.
continent has a mirror, like Africa's mirror, like mirror is that one, the one that you go to in Ochin, and then you go to like Ireland's mirror, and like all their shit is like Celtic gods and all that fucking like moss and like monsters and shit like that.
Like what's that place in what's that place in England? Stonehenge.
Stonehenge,
Oh,
yeah.
Stonehenge. Yeah,
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 and there
yeah,
it's
yeah.
actually heads underneath, like buried underneath like the bedrock, and like oh, you see, like that would be cool. That like you go into the mirror world, and it's like they're how they're supposed to be, like above the thing, and
Right.
they're making fun of the real life version. It's like, man, we can't even see up there. Makes no sense. Why even have it?
Right. I mean, like I said, like the possibilities are. I mean, it's just endless. But now that I think about it, though, I don't even think like I've when it comes to the mirror, I've wrote myself in the corner, but because I don't think I can even do that because the mirror in itself, how I've written is integral to the Sahara Desert because it ties in to that timeline and how it was formed when you go back in archaic times because it has like a historical context. So like in that sense, I've like pretty much written myself into a corner that I have to abide by it. And even if I expand, it can't be the mirror. It would have to be the characters in itself that
Mm,
expand. Yeah, because the mirror, I feel like the way I've written it is like, yeah, it wouldn't be able to do it like if I did it like that, like a Stargate kind of like kind of
yeah.
like concept, because like I've tied it to a historical kind of like a historical sort of like inciting incident that like plays into the Sahara Desert uniquely, and there's a reason why the mirror is in the Sahara Desert and why it's buried deep within it. So in that sense, I don't think I'll be able to spread it out. But character wise, though, I'm definitely going to spread them out once I start telling these different, characters and stuff like that that are all connected into this cinematic universe.
Well, what about all right, well, what about if there was a mirror in another planet that's somehow connected to an ancient civilization on Earth?
I mean that I can do that. That would
Yeah,
definitely
right. That would be
that's
within.
functional.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, that's
functional,
within.
right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
super functional. Yeah, like I said, that goes back to like
Okay.
kind of like the Stargate kind of like concept.
Yeah, exactly. Like, cause I wasn't thinking about Stargate, but when you said it, I was like, oh shit, okay.
Yeah,
Cause that's one thing, man. That's one of the things. I mean, it's the reason why I love like that whole like culture and the whole like thing we were talking about myth. Is it really myth? It was, it could
right,
just be history that we don't believe in anymore, right?
right,
So that that whole thing is like what the Native Americans and what the indigenous people say about those times. Yo, they say with a confidence. Like there's a thing called like the portal of the sun, like the yeah, I think it's called like the portal of the sun in Arizona, and
right,
it's literally like a door, kind of like just like kind of like an archway, I should
right,
say, with like a staircase to it, and it's kind of just like it almost seems like in the middle of nowhere, but like when at a certain time and a certain rotation of the sun and like a certain day and all that bullshit,
right,
it lines up perfectly with like a whole lines up and it lights this thing in the middle, and supposedly around those times that it was like a ceremony of summoning what they considered to be gods, and they would say that they're gods without a single doubt. On the time frame they would come through that portal, like they would like
hmm
when the light shone in that angle and that whole thing, the gods would like it would like activate the portal and the gods would walk through it, and noted. I mean, this is in Sumerian text. I mean, then again, what do I really? I didn't read it,
yeah,
but based on what I read of some other dude reading it who says
right,
that he knows his shit,
right,
uh, supposedly they said with confidence that their gods, that the people from this portal came from the third planet, and well, they didn't say it like specifically like Sirius B, but they said there was the middle planet in Orion's belt.
right,
Like the three planets, the three little stars that we had, the middle one, they were like without a doubt, boom, that right there.
right,
And they said it with the same way that I guess like a person would talk about heaven,
right,
because faith and confidence are kind of like the same shit.
right,
So it's just again like that is the heart of what writing is, right? That's like
right,
what we
right, right,
authors do, because you can take that little bullshit and just
right.
like expand it into your own bullshit.
Right, exactly. Like you can take it and you can roll with it, right? That's yeah, that's what fuels the fantasy and the fiction genre, right? It's like like these stories are just they're embedded within like the myth and like our consciousness, because it's so specific to certain cultures, but at the same time it's broad in all cultures. Like it's like embedded in all kinds of these cultures that they all have their own myths that kind of like almost like are sort of like similar in a lot of ways.
Mm.
And so like it's just one of those things. It's just like I don't know if you know Joseph Campbell.
No, I don't.
Um, yeah, he's like one of the old he's like a psycho kind of like historian, kind of like and he like talks about myths, and like he went to all these like different parts of the world, and he gathered all their myths and stuff like that, and like he put it together and formed like this collage, and he realized that all these myths have like a lot in common, you know. And it's great. It's He's like one of like the staples in like when it comes to like myth and folklore and legends and stuff like that. And like he's probably one of the people who've done the most extensive studies in the look into that. And you definitely love what he has to say about a lot of this stuff. And
Hell yeah, I gotta look that up.
yeah, he's very popular in like fantasy and fiction circles. But yeah, he talks about a lot of these myths and like what they are, what they kind of like contribute to the zeitgeist as a whole of like our subconscious and our myths, how we tell our stories when it comes to heroes, legends, and stuff like that, and how that affects things today just as much as it affected things way back when. It's kind of like still along the parallel lines of like the same thing. And so like yeah, he goes really into depth and talks about it. And it's very interesting because these cultures have nothing to do with each other, yet the similarities of like how they understand or like how they digest your myths and tell it, and like are kind of like very eerily very similar. And so
Mm.
like it begs the question, like the answer, like is this really like embedded deep within our subconscious, or like part of like some kind of like universal zeitgeist, even as as we're kind of like spread or dive dispersed in the world sort of like situation. And he makes a compelling argument to that fact. But yeah, it was a very interesting documentary that I definitely recommend. And he has a book out too, which the documentary is based off of. But um,
Yeah, I
yeah.
gotta. That's probably gonna fuel a lot of inspiration. Hell
Yeah.
yeah, I got.
Oh
I got
yeah.
it. Joseph Campbell. Yeah,
Yeah, Joseph
that's the
Campbell.
one.
Yeah,
I'm
even
gonna
just
get into
YouTube
that.
his name, you'll see a whole bunch of stuff like that's. He's a very like a known name in like the circles of fantasy and stuff like, because a lot of people get their inspirations from the stuff that he has to say about myth and folklore and tales and stuff like that around the world.
Hell yeah, yeah. I definitely gotta look that up.
Yeah.
Um, so going back into Ocean's Odyssey Part Two, is it called Volume Two? How you? What's the naming convention you're going?
Episodes.
Episode. So episode
Yes.
one, and episode two.
Yep.
Have you thought of? Have you got started any the art for it at all? Like so because I know you went with kind of like an orange kind of earth tone theme for your cover of episode one. Are you gonna what are you doing for episode two?
Episode two, probably the color scheme is gonna be slightly different, but the coverers are gonna be very like they're gonna go, pretty much along the lines of the same template,
Yeah, yeah.
like just to keep it consistent. But yeah, so I'll probably like because the second story is going to be based. Well, I don't know if you want. I don't know if yeah, that would be a spoiler if I told you what it's
No,
gonna
yeah.
be based on.
Don't spoil
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
But
yeah,
like
yeah.
talk about as much of the general as you can without getting too much into specifics.
So I haven't started any artwork for the second one, but I already have it, visualized in my head and everything. It's just as much as the story, kind of like the general direction of the story for episode two. And I just pretty much have to get to like start writing it and stuff like that. But yeah, so generally it's probably going to be a darker theme than the first book, because we're delving more into like we get to know more of the characters, we get to see more of the gods, and a lot of the things that happen in the first episode, especially at the end, is going to inform what is going to happen in the next episode. And yeah, so the next episode is going to be, yeah, definitely darker. And um and it's going to be on the lines of the themes of sacrifice, which is going to be a very big theme. And that runs across the story itself, like as a whole, like the theme of sacrifice and how much you have to give up to like get what you want, sort of a situation. And so like in book
Mm.
two is definitely one of those situations where you're like, oh crap, like kind of like situation. So it's a darker theme. The gods that are going to appear in this one are also pretty dope. And yeah, so I kind of like already have the story mapped out and everything, and I kind of have an idea of how the art is gonna kind of like kind of come across and stuff like that. So it's just a matter of like starting to put it to paper.
Because I know in Ochins we get introduced to the fighting styles of wait, don't tell me. It's there's air,
Yes,
there's earth.
yes,
I'm pretty sure there's fire,
yes.
but fire is the combination of air and earth. No.
No, no. There's three layers of the
Yeah,
fight
I know Storm is
of
top, and then Storm is top of the pyramid.
yes,
The two middle ones are fire and lightning.
yes. Storm is the top. That means yes.
Yeah, and then
Lightning and air are the middle ones, and then fire, earth, and water are
and
the
water are
three
the middle.
base elements of the
Yeah,
fighting stances.
and the three bases are what mix
Yeah,
into
yeah,
the two top ones, and then the master of two top ones gets the storm, right? Yeah.
yes,
All right.
exactly.
So are we
Yeah,
gonna
yeah. So the
uh
storm knows it all.
get introduced to any new fighting styles for episode 2? Or is it just a continuation of
Um,
that and Ocean is getting more dirtier and getting dealing with higher ranking people of the same ranking system?
yeah, yeah, definitely. He's gonna deal definitely in episode two. He's gonna deal with more grime. He's going to get his hands way more dirty.
Mm,
In the first episode, he sort of gets like very minor, when it comes to like him actually getting involved with the thicket of the action. He ain't no Achilles or nothing like that. He's kind of like just a
mm,
young kid, kind of like gets
I like that.
caught up in this world. So he's very like very avant-garde, and when it comes to like getting his hands dirty, he's not gonna really do much. He's not gonna really do much per se as the prototypical like protagonist where he's just going in like I am Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I'm just gonna go and kill. I'm just gonna do my thing, and kind of like
Here's my
nobody can
dick.
stop me,
Pa pa
right?
pa.
Like he's not he's definitely he hasn't even got to that point yet. So episode one just kind of like deals with him, just kind of like getting used to that world. Episode two, like I said, he gets more grimy and dirtier. You get to see fighting. How much fighting you get to see, it depends. Because um episode two is going to deal with sort of like different forces, like it's,
Mm,
it's going to be a lot of, because there's a little bit of abstract and a little bit of like physical. So there is going to be fighting, but I can't say exactly how much there is going to be. But I've when the fighting really picks up, and when you really get in depth to like understanding, you know the concept of what the art of Intokwa is, and the martial art is probably when you get to episode three. um
mm,
because then that's when he pretty much gets in contact with the people who are the most proficient at this art, like this fighting style. And the storm deals with man's fighting. It actually deals with the art of Intokwa. So yeah, you're really going to see that kind of like come to front and center in episode three. So episode two, you'll see it. You'll see some, but it's not going to be front and center, per se.
man, that is fucking wow. That's a lot to take in. So, so how far are you in with episode 2? Are you just doing? Are you still in the outline phase, still plotting it out? Are you have you gotten into the writing of the prologue, the chapter?
It's pretty much right now. right now it's all up here right now. Like all the formulation that I'm doing, it's constructing it in my head right now. So I'm literally just, I just got it all up in my head, and I'm trying to do as much as I can outline wise in my head, so that as soon as I get to writing and start putting it on paper, it's kind of like it's a goal. Like I know where I'm started, I know where I'm headed. I know what's the broad outline of what's about to happen is. And so like that's mostly uh, um, where I'm at right now. Because I'm still trying to like finish off like Ochi's Odyssey when it comes to like promoting it and getting it out there and getting people hyped up for it, and all that stuff. So I want to give myself like a at least 1 or 2 more months of that, of getting it out there, and then soon as January hits, then I'm back to work, and then I'm focusing on book two, and then trying to get it out there. Maybe hopefully I can write it in half a year, get it done, edited and stuff like that, publish so that I can, I can put it out. If I can do it in less time, that'll be great. But yeah, so that's the plan. That's the plan, and hopefully everything goes according to plan.
Well, hey, that's a good plan to have, especially that we're still have a regular day job and whatnot. One of the authors that I interviewing for that I'm one of the guys that I'm gonna be interviewing in the series is like a fully time, full functioning author. Does it that that's been his life for like 15 years, and just talking to him was just such a contrast because every person I've been talking, me and you, my own experience, most of the people I've been talking to are the same thing of like, oh no, yeah, I have a regular job.
Yeah, right.
Anything that we do is like accustomed to that. I got bills
Right.
to pay. I got this thing.
Yeah.
It was so different. I mean, inspiring because that's the point you want to be at, right? The only
Right.
reason we're talking about this whole like 5 months thing is because we have a regular job on top of it.
Right.
If we were doing this full time, we'd be cranking it out. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Exactly. Yeah. It's one of those things like if we're full
Uh,
time is like, yeah, it'll be so much easier.
yeah.
But yeah, it's life.
No, but that's the whole thing of this, right? Because as everything goes through and we can just keep on like promoting just not ourselves but like people that we're friends with. I'll definitely be
Right.
promoting your shit as much as possible, and just everything can grow and like this like good and like this good heap of everything, and it's just like such an awesome thing that the whole like self-publishing thing. And I don't know.
Right.
Beautiful industry that everyone
Oh
really,
yeah.
yeah, that people are
It's a
really like
very
into it, and like there's not too many people. It's not like music where like people like immediately look at the newer guy and just like, oh, who the fuck is that guy? And like there's like
right.
people on the
Right.
top trying to squash the like the smaller people. It really is just kind of
Right,
like
right. It's a
everyone's
very nice,
voices.
tightly knit community. That's just like once you're in there, it's really cool because people are always trying to like check out your stuff, promote you as much as they can, and there's always like feedback and going back and forth and stuff like that. So it's really cool, like just to be in the space, just existing in the space is in itself really cool. And so like, can't be mad at that. You cannot be mad at
Yeah.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
talking about feedback, what is
Hmm.
have you ever what is like the best feedback you've gotten so far as like in your critique? And it doesn't even have to be external. It doesn't have to be that somebody wrote your shit, and just maybe it's something that you just found within yourself. Like what I was telling about earlier with Iris of Mercy, how I wrote it in one narrative element, and then I realized
Hmm.
it would be better to double back in another one, and it would be more interesting in that element, something that I immediately recognized within myself and what to fix. Is there anything that you could think of that you
Right.
found in your own career?
Um. I mean, not really, because I mean, like I pretty much this is like my first, like I'm just starting off. Like for the most part, like I've just been, world building and trying to like teaching myself how to write and stuff like that proficiently and stuff like that. So like for the most part, I've just been like, in the background, just kind of like just hammering away at the story and stuff like that. So like the feedback has mostly been with myself for the most part. And so like, for when it comes to like mistakes and stuff like that, I kind of like have to like, inform myself about it, and kind of like self-correct it, as I'm going along. And yeah, I mean, I've come across like, like I said, like it's been like as I was writing it, there's just been so many, drafts and manuscripts, and there's just like that's just never gonna see the light of the day because it's just terrible. I mean, just
Yeah.
god awful, just god awful.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. My first revision of the book, my friend literally printed out the first chapter and highlighted the amount of times I used I, like I did
Yeah.
this, yeah, I did that, like you know what I mean? And literally it looked like the page went to a
Uh-huh.
rave, you know what I mean? It was just all colored. It was like Jesus. And I was just like flipping through and I was like, and he didn't even have to say anything else. I just knew. I was like, yeah. And I can't tell you how well that drilled it into me. If I
Yeah,
write
it's
or if I'm writing and there's like the second I in the page, I'm like, how can we get rid of this?
right. It's just
I
one of
don't
those things
know.
you have to be. It's just mindful because the editing phase is just grueling.
Oh, editing.
It's a grind. It is such a grind, and so like even
It is
now
a
as my
huge
book is
mountain that you
out.
look up and you're like, oh fuck.
Right, and even as like my book is out right now, I'm still seeing like these like typos. I'm like, I went through so many editing phases, and I'm still seeing typos,
Dog.
and I'm like, oh my god. And so like I'm continuously like, I'm about to probably like next week I'm gonna have to like run another editing phase just to make sure like all these typos, these little typos that I'm seeing are like, out, because I'm still seeing them and it like bothering me. And so it's just never, the work is never done, like it's just but that's also the price I have to pay for not having like like a in-depth like professional editor that goes in and checks all these typos and stuff like that, because I'm, like I said, I'm doing it mostly myself. And so like, that's sort of like a little bit of, a little the price that I paid for that. But um but yeah, it's just what it is, and so like I said, the work is never done, and I'm just gonna keep hacking away at it, keep trying to like make it better and stuff like that. And it is what it is.
Hey, well, listen, that is awesome, and everything you're doing with the book has been completely just. I'm blown away by the fucking the world that you've told me so far. Everything that you're telling me that is gonna come up. I mean, definitely something that I'm gonna be looking forward to in the future. For now, Amazon.com, Ocean's Odyssey, people. You gotta read it. You gotta pick this shit up. Recommend it heavily. I was rereading the prologue in the first chapter a little bit before we started, and just I loved it. It was so it just immediately builds you in, and you're like, oh hell yeah, what's up? What's up? How we doing this?
Right.
uh, so
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
definitely anim8works.com, ANIM number 8WORKS, in case you didn't know.com. Check
You
the
know.
shit out. Follow the man on Instagram. Where can the people find you again?
Yeah, so like you said, the website, that's the main base. And then on Twitter at AnimateWorks, on Instagram s.animaddo, and then on Facebook it's the same thing, s.animaddo. So those are like the social medias that I'm on right now, that you can catch me up. And yeah, so yeah, grab yourself a copy. Hopefully you enjoy it. Wrote it with love, and so hopefully that jumps off the page.
Yeah, no, and it definitely will be. Look, as far as the content, that's 100% dope. People just need to go out and find it, and people will find it over time. Trust. Now,
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely.
this is gonna have to be the because we're approaching that time again. Another phenomenal episode. We'll have to check back on you for a part three sometime again in the future, right? So that is the end of the
Definitely.
yeah. So that is the end of the podcast, folks. check up with on us next week. We're gonna do another episode of Hours of Mercy, and then tomorrow we meet with another author from Reddit. That is the end of the
Um,
podcast, folks.
all right, man. See you, man. Thank you
Yeah,
for having me, as always.
yeah, no, thank you for coming on, man. It was a fucking pleasure.
Yeah,
Follow
yeah,
us
it was.
on at official underscore Neotino on Instagram, at official Neotino, no underscore for Twitter. And and also we have a special one for Allegory of the End at Allegory of the End. No special marks or anything on that. Follow us. We got a whole bunch of pictures. We got a whole bunch of things up and graphics up. Follow fucking Anim Addo for the same thing on Instagram. Do what you got to do. That is the end of the episode, folks. We will catch up on you later.
All right.
Peace
See you,
out.
man.